Be advised, Blue Rose Task Force is filled with secrets and spoilers.
And it's a mystery. It's a mystery.
I wish you the best of luck.
Welcome to the Blue Rose Task Force podcast, where we look deeply into Twin Peaks as a whole, one episode at a time, using the full scope of the show Twin Peaks and all its official media. We don't use the word canon, but we consider all official releases important because Lynch and Frost have approved their presence. And we welcome all input into the collective consciousness that is the Twin Peaks community and the wider universe. This podcast is a watch-along podcast for those who've seen all of Twin Peaks, including the third season, which we consider as we go along. Today, we are looking at the fifth overall episode of Twin Peaks, Episode 4, often known, depending where you look, as Season 1, Episode 5, or what the German regionalization team named The One-Armed Man. I'm your host, John. In Episode 4, Deputy Andy sketches Bob based on Sarah Palmer's description. And Leland condescendingly brings up her other vision at the end of the pilot. Jacoby thinks every problem is of a sexual nature before he roundaboutly connects Leo to Laura's final night. Gordon calls in with good information on Laura's autopsy results. Josie stakes out Ben and Catherine while the lawmen dubiously question Philip Gerard. Audrey and Donna share some information in the bathroom. Cooper and Harry investigate a veterinarian office. Bobby and Shelley plan solutions to their Leo problem, and Cooper admits at the shooting range to a broken heart in his past. James gets hypnotized by meeting Maddie Ferguson. Audrey talks her dad into giving her a job, and the lawmen learn Waldo the Minor Bird is owned by Jacques, who also has a planted bloody shirt of Leo's in his place, while Leo gets hired for arson by Ben. James and Donna discover the necklace they buried was stolen, and all of this was done while Hank was getting out on parole and threatening Josie with a pencil sketch. I know this was back in Season 1, but a path is formed by laying one stone at a time, and we have questions left after we've seen all the stones laid down throughout Twin Peaks. The questions we will be dealing with this week? What are the two Twin Peaks that are revealing themselves here? How is Cooper's investigative technique best suited to this environment? How does memory affect reality in Twin Peaks? What kind of presence is Laura Palmer? How do people cope with the darkness? And what does Hank Jennings' arrival signify? So as always, we're going to start by looking into the production history back when this episode was originally being made. So Episode 4 was written by Robert Engels and directed by Tim Hunter. Tim Hunter knew Lynch from AFI, where they went to film school together. Per Twin Peaks Unwrapped, Tim Hunter said it was the first class when the program started in 1970. He also explained to them the process, that it was 7 to 8 days of prep, which entails exterior location scouting, production meetings, that kind of thing, followed by 7 or 8 days of shooting. He said, like, just in general, I mean, this is like even beyond Twin Peaks. You'd be lucky to have the script before you get there. And in the beginning, everybody knew that Twin Peaks was something special. Like, everybody knew it. Another particularly Twin Peaks thing that Hunter noticed is that all the actresses had this certain calmness to them, which he credited as a Lynchian casting trait. He said that on the artist and DVD commentaries. He said that the magic trick that Russ Tamblyn was doing, that was actually something Russ Tamblyn brought to it himself. And usually ad-libbing wasn't done, but he couldn't. But Hunter couldn't remember if it was approved by him or sanctioned by like somebody higher up the ladder. But everybody went with it. It was fine. That llama that we'll see later on, Hunter actually was driving past a llama farm on the way to work, and he just thought, it's like, wouldn't that be neat? So he asked production, and they said, sure. One other thing Hunter says about the production of Twin Peaks in particular is how there's those 200 sound cues that Laurie Eschler kind of had a handle on, and she would work with every director about it. Like sometimes it gets sped up, sometimes it gets slowed down, but like she was able to help the director figure out the exact mood that they wanted, and he Hunter basically said that at the very end, the final scene that he did was 3 separate music cues sewn together. And yeah, it's really interesting how it's not necessarily just Badalamenti. It's collaborative there as well. One thing Robert Engels said about Tim Hunter is that the Dutch angles that he does, the skewed camera angles, they were allowed for Hunter because he was the closest thing to what David Lynch and Mark Frost wanted for the show. So, being such a natural, he was allowed to do whatever he wanted. And speaking of Bob Engels, he was the writer of this episode, and this was his first involvement with Twin Peaks. How he was connected wasn't through Lynch, but it was through Frost, and it was through the Minnesota side where Frost grew up. So when Engels was 17, Warren Frost was his professor back at the University of Minnesota. He's Engels basically said to Twin Peaks Unwrapped in their book, he's known Mark since he was 12. So that's that's kind of a funny thing to have as a memory of your boss on a TV show. Engels and Frost also knew Chris Mulkey from Minnesota, and Engels actually wrote Hank specifically for him. The Twin Peaks Parole Board, he also said, was from mostly Minnesota actors. Per the Essential Wrapped in Plastic, at the time there was a Wise Guy episode that was also from a small town that involved logging and everything, and Engels actually worked on that show. He got hired to do Wise Guy the same day he got hired to write a script for Twin Peaks. And per the Essential Wrapped in Plastic by John Thorne, he said, everybody thinks I brought that to Wise Guy. I brought the Wise Guy story from Twin Peaks to it. But as he says, the Wise Guy people were already planning it when he got there. So it doesn't say how he got the job on Wise Guy, but I know how he got a call from Mark Frost. He said this one, basically Frost told him, this show is really screwy. You'd be really good at it. One particular thing that he was good at was that a lot of Cole's dialogue, a lot of Gordon Cole's dialogue was by Engels because he had an aunt who was hard of hearing. As far as the writing itself, per the Artisan DVD Season 1 commentary, in general, and this goes throughout at least the first season, Engels said the 3 shows that we all loved and referenced were The Fugitive, Wild Wild West, and Mayberry. That's the Andy Griffith show. And he also mentioned how noir, they named a lot of things after noir shows. Okay, so we've heard from the people creating the show, and now we're going to start dissecting the Log Lady intro that David Lynch wrote back when everybody thought there was not going to be any more Twin Peaks, and he was going to give everybody a final word to think about while they watched the show. So this week, Margaret says, even the ones who laugh are sometimes caught without an answer. These creatures who introduce themselves, but swear we have met them somewhere before, yes? Look in the mirror. What do you see? Is it a dream or a nightmare? Are we being introduced against our will? Are they mirrors? I can see the smoke. I can smell the fire. The battle is drawing nigh. Okay, so when I first heard about this one, it seemed a little dramatic to me. It's like, ooh, Hank comes to town. Okay. But now that I've been looking into it a little bit deeper for this podcast, it ends up making a lot more sense that it would be that dramatic. Um, so let's look into it piece by piece, even though the ones who laugh. So um, that to me says like the people that are generally trying to be positive or are positive, they can be confronted with darkness. So even the places that don't usually see the darkness can be confronted with it, and that just means like any place in Twin Peaks is fair game for this. We'll see later. Nadine's darkness. We'll see. Yeah, it's just all over, comic relief or otherwise. Like it's fair game. Um, so yeah, is it a dream or a nightmare? So like the people that are kind of being influenced by the dreamy side of Twin Peaks, that weather pattern that I've been talking about of lodge space, kind of like changing the frequency of like how people see the place. Um, it's like they might be stuck in a dream, but then you might be able to notice eventually that the dream is actually a nightmare. So it can change. It can change gradually, or it could just be a realization. But yeah, it's all available. Like all you have to do is look into a mirror, and sometimes you see somebody else. Um, like what do you do when you see the thing in the mirror? I read that from a plot point of view, obviously as Bob, but it's like anytime you see darkness, because in this part of Twin Peaks, the mirror seems to signify what is in the interior space, which is oftentimes going to be portrayed through darkness. So Margaret also says, I can see the smoke, I can smell the fire. It reminds me of things that we'll see later on, and in like the term scorched engine oil, that kind of thing. The smell, the smoke, these are the visible signs of the effect of lodge space. But in this particular episode, it's easy to read it as arson, because this is the first time Catherine and Ben bring up arson. And, Leo never heard of the job of arson before this episode either. So, from a plot point of view, it's kind of a froofy way to say, arson is coming, but it also totally matches up with all the themes. Yeah. So, um, even if against, there's the whole thing about, are we being introduced against our will? It works out well with the menace of Bob, especially being seen by people immediately in that sketch. It's like Bob is the first thing we basically see, besides the back of Andy's head. But it ends up also, um, it ends up also showing the influence of Hank throughout this episode. And it's a similar negative wave that you can see, and you can, well, I mean, the townsfolk can smell them and all that, but it's like all the stuff, like we can smell what he's going to be doing with Josie based on his threatening at the end. Whether supernaturally inclined or not, there's plenty of darkness that we're going to be able to recognize in this episode. Okay, so we're at the part after where we look into the production. We're after when David Lynch had his final say, and we're finally going to start looking at the particular episodes based on how all of season 3 and all of Fire Walk with Me and like all of the details through the end of the series might add perspective to what we're seeing here. Okay, so our first avenue of inquiry today is basically about the duality that I just kind of hinted at. What are the two Twin Peaks that are revealing themselves here in this episode? So yeah, a lot of darkness. Log Lady Intro's talking about it. From Bob being written down on paper, being said aloud in a lot of ways. Um, But it's not just the metaphysical stuff, it's also arson is coming to the surface. The drug scene is getting bigger and more laid out as Hank becomes more visible. And what's um, what's really interesting that I didn't even notice until this read through of the episode. But there's a part of this episode that I mean, I never even really noticed this about episode 4 until I really watched through deeply, like even more deeply than usual this time. Um, Engels filled the script with doubles this time. It's there's a detail that relates specifically to Laura's investigation, but then there's a matching detail that matches up with the greater town, whether it's the Jacques investigation or just, random things like Hank arriving. Um, we have Audrey and Hank both getting jobs from family members after lying about how badly they want to change. It's like they use the same wording all the way through. I mean, I'll look into all these points later on. But there's a drawing of Bob. There's a drawing of the domino. They both have a similar connotation and a similar execution of how to get that idea across. Bobby and Josie both leave out their complicities when they're telling their loved one about what's going on with things. There's Andy and Shelley both need to learn how to shoot a gun. It's like there's all these parallels. Um, even even when Sarah Palmer says, Bob, he looked like an animal. And then, what do we get later? We get a veterinarian's office filled with animals. I mean, it's kind of all over the place. Even Bob Lydecker, it's like Mike sees Mike sees Bob in his dream, and then Philip Gerard, his best friend, not his familiar this time, but his best friend, is also in a coma, stuck in kind of a dreamland right now. I mean, there's more of this all over the place, but it's here, and it seems like it's a little bit more put together than just coincidence all the way through. So there's these two levels to Twin Peaks. There's the kind of metaphysical one, there's the kind of physical one, and then Cooper comes in and just absolutely loves the place. It's like he's connecting to this place all over, and he seems to be able to solve crimes based in these two areas at once. And I mean, basically, the question is, how is Cooper's investigative technique best suited to this environment? I'm going to look into this question through three quotes from this episode. First thing off, we get, "I'm a strong sender," which is why he didn't go over to Sarah's while she was describing the picture of Bob. Um, so, first of all, he knows this about himself. I'm assuming that's in keeping with how he got the Tibetan method with the rock throw. It's like he just knows by now that he has this ability within dreaming that it's like maybe he can influence people around him, which kind of describes how he dealt with the part 17 and 18 of season 3, but we'll get there later. As far as right now, there's how he has this kinship with the town. It's like being in touch with a dreamy frequency. Is it kind of like, does he feel at home with all this portal adjacency in the air? Um, or is he picking up on the positive frequency like um like his other influence, like how we talked about wanting to get real estate and everything? Like, is he picking up on the positive side that's coming out of this lodge adjacency? Um, what we see here, mostly, how we see that come through here is, after Harry says that he didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night, which means Harry wasn't really doing so well with the higher level of himself after he decked Albert and he was waiting for the repercussions. Harry, I mean, Cooper says, "Harry, the last thing I want you to worry about while I'm here is some city slicker I brought into your town relieving himself upstream." So, like, is the town a strong sender? And, like, giving him only the positive side of things. I mean, Cooper wants to leave this place the way he's met it, which means that he likes how it is. And it's like, I know he can see the darkness with Laura's investigation and everything, but as far as the town, he seems to have a rosy colored view of what's going on. Later on, he'll say, "Gentlemen, when two separate events occur simultaneously pertaining to the same object of inquiry, we must always pay strict attention." In the actual context, Gordon's just given them info over the phone about a parrot or a minor bird wounds, plus about the poker chip. And it ends up leading to Jacques, who will be the owner of the one. I mean, it will lead them to Jacques, who is the bird owner, as well as connected to the One-Eyed Jack's poker chip. And both sides of those clues end up leading into Laura's investigation as they connect the dots. So Cooper knew that it was worth paying attention to and that it probably would lead into Laura's investigation. And the last thing that Cooper said that I'm going to focus on is Harry. And, this is when we have that great llama interaction. In the heat of the investigative pursuit, the shortest distance between 2 points is not necessarily a straight line. And, the actual context is because the bird that attacked Laura is a client of this office, which will lead to Jacques being a clue. But it mirrors the earlier question where they get to the one-armed man. When Coop asks how long it takes to get to the place where Hawk called them about, we get Andy and Harry saying at the same time, 10 minutes, half an hour. And Andy says, it depends how you go. So there's time in relation to physical distance, and then there's time in relation to understanding. And that really comes out. And, the straightest or the the shortest distance has mostly to do with actual understanding. And really, in this case, it's kind of like how Cooper could have taken the socket in part 3 of season 3. He could have taken the 3 socket or the 15 socket. And it seems like the 3 socket would have put him in episode 3 in a plot that he wasn't ready to deal with, whereas they put him out in 15 when he was able to wake up and say things like, I am the FBI, and just take charge. In this case, how I'm seeing that relate to here is that the lead from Hawk took them to Philip Gerard, but it did not take them to Mike. So the straightest path to the information they need actually takes them into an episode in season 2. So it took a lot longer than 10 minutes, and it took a lot longer than a half an hour. So bringing up the difference between Mike and Philip Gerard, depending on whether you feel like lodge denizens are masking memories over trauma, it kind of tells whether you see spirits as or as a delusion. And there's good evidence for all of the above. I mean, there's even a good, there'll be good evidence that the delusion kind of creates the spirits, and the spirits end up taking a life of their own. I mean, it's all wibbly wobbly gray space. There's enough characters though in this series that have seen the spirits in the same shape, and I say that they're independent entities. It's not exclusively just like masking stuff. So in that way, I don't think Philip Gerard is sheerly delusional, but um, in this particular scene, when we find him in that hotel, it also seems like he was just going, about his business, getting dressed after a shower, and he somehow didn't hear Andy's gun going off right outside his door. So like he's got a weird kind of like non-connection to where he is. So after 3 episodes, Hawk finally finds Gerard. And then we see Gerard's body shown, like his actual body, like not covered up by a shirt or anything. And, instead of getting him talking like he's, one chance out between, like he's not Mike. He is certainly not that. He's all golly gee, kind of like he is a character out of Mayberry, just like Deputy Andy. Um, and when Cooper and the guys are questioning him, he says this, which is really curious to me about Bob. Kind of looks like somebody, doesn't it? So he can't remember his dream side's familiar, yet he feels like he should be able to be, that he feels like Bob should be able to be recognized. So like there's no value judgment from Philip Gerard on Bob, but there could be. It's like if he it's almost like he knows that if he changed that frequency dial a little bit, he would be able to know exactly who this is. It's a good turn of phrase that Engels put in on there. Also makes me wonder if that inability to recognize has something to do with when he cut his arm off, but that's a whole different thing. And it doesn't really jive with Fire Walk With Me, but I mean, that could be where the barrier came from. So another interesting parallel is Gerard says the tattoo said "Mom," and that has nothing to do with what Cooper said it was, which was "Fire Walk With Me." Um, but if you compare the invocation of "Fire Walk With Me" and "Mom," does that mean mother? Like, mother's just outside the door, which in part 3 we hear All American Girl saying. And does that mean Judy is on the table? Oh, just putting it out there. We will probably be able to discuss that, especially in Firewalk With Me, but maybe earlier, maybe later. And Gerard's disconnection here seems really similar to how Leland has disconnections with his Bob side. Um, like we'll get in episode 16, we'll get all the returned memories from Bob. It's like when I pull the ripcord, he'll remember everything, like that whole deal. So like there's a certain part of the human being that I think can be masked over, like separated from their dark side, so that they're not even able to see it. um and it kind of helps explain, um it kind of helps explain how um Leland might be behaving in this episode. So let's assume that Leland is completely disconnected from his Bob side here. Like, why is he angry at Sarah earlier in the episode? um it's, he brings up, she had two visions, and it's like super dismissive, and it's super just like he's done with this stuff. And is he is he angry because of how she treated him after his coffin dive? I mean, like there's the human side of things says, like, it's like, sure, he's a crying guy, but he also like just is kind of done with this whole thing. Like he wants it put behind him, and he's like, yeah. But let's say there's Bob influence too. Like why would why would Bob allow Leland to reveal the second vision? Well, he didn't take the necklace. It's like he put half of it on on a dirt mound and everything, but um he wasn't the one who had the other half. So this could possibly be taking the trail off of Bob and Leland. It could also be he's possessive of his things, and Laura's his thing, the necklaces are his thing, and maybe he just wants it found. So like, why not bring it up to the lawmen? They can maybe get it for him, who knows. Okay, so we've been talking about Philip Gerard and Mike, we've been talking about Leland and Bob, and there's the there's the other presence that we get in this episode, which is Laura. I mean, she shows up again. We see her in um we see her mostly this time in Maddie. And, it's not like a possession thing, but James, when, he's at the diner, he's listening to, I mean, he's calling Donna and getting info on diet lasagna and everything else in the background over on Donna's side. And I tell you what, diet lasagna seems like a Blue Rose case if I ever heard one. It's very unnatural to Doc Hayward, and he expresses it in the most happy way possible, which was awesome to see. But James wasn't really on that frequency at all. It's like, he could listen to Donna, he could interact with her, and he does make plans which he keeps. So he's obviously not super hypnotized, but when he sees Maddie, he just locks on to her and he focuses so much that, it's like he basically gets off the phone as quick as he can with Donna, and he just stares at Maddie. He gets right up in her face staring at her. And for some reason, when she turns and notices that he's right there, like, she smiles at him, which, I certainly wouldn't do. But she smiles, and then she removes her glasses, which is a thing she will do as she kind of becomes more and more Laura. And, like, she tells Uncle Leland that on the morning when she dies. It's like she kind of liked being Laura. And in this case, I don't know if it means that James is a strong sender, even though he's kind of dumb as a brick. But he he's like projecting seeing Laura on her, and it's obviously she's the same actress, blah blah blah. But it's like we get her first physical Laura move is removing the glasses, and what information we get is we she says how the stuff about Sarah, she's too broken to cook, and Leland just dances around with old records and everything. So, like, we get confirmation of what we see right before Cooper's dream in episode 2. We also get information that Laura and Maddie, whenever Maddie would come to visit, they used to pretend to be sisters. So she's kind of getting Laura projected onto her, but she's become Laura before intentionally with Laura right there. So in a lot of ways, Maddie is the perfect vessel to repeat the behavior through lodge space adjacent metaphysical kind of ways. They also make a physical connection, which probably means something. But like they shake hands at the end, and she says James Hurley by full name and like everything. So, like, there's a connection made between them, like, while he's like totally wowed by Laura sort of returning physically. Another way that we see Laura is really abstractly. It's more just in thematic ways. Bernie Renault got tied up basically the same kind of way by Leo. So I mean, that's there probably more as just a misdirection that Leo knows how to do that sort of stuff, and they need to keep the suspect thing going for Leo. Um, but as far as later, we get when Donna's talking to James, she says that Sarah's vision about Bob and that Laura also had spooky dreams. So they're kind of connected to the same source, Sarah and Laura, which, seems lodge spacey. Your Audrey to Donna, we learn for sure that Ronette and Laura both worked at the perfume counter together. So we do know that the writers still know who Ronette is, even though they don't talk about Ronette. It's like I kind of noticed some fridging happening, even though one character really hasn't been fridged at all. That still kind of happens. It's more about, Ronette is there to forward the plot of Laura. So it's not to forward the hero, but it is to forward the investigation. Show was written in 1990. That's about all I can say there. It's about 7 years before the term fridging had a scene to go with in Green Lantern. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to talk about. I don't really like it, but I have to point at it every time I see Ronette show up and wonder why she didn't show up more often. So the last time we see Laura's presence show up, or a detail about Laura show up, is when Jacoby is talking to Cooper, in when Cooper is interrogating him at the sheriff's station. So Jacoby says Laura had secrets. Around those secrets, she built a fortress that in my 6 months with her, I was not able to penetrate, and for what I consider myself an abject failure. So Jacoby kind of mythologizing the whole that Laura has an effect on him. But in this, we get the detail that Laura was only seeing him for 6 months. So yeah, and she's trying to medicate, um, by seeing him by the cocaine was her way of trying to medicate, which he thought was a positive sign. But we will get into a little bit more about the drug side of thing later on. But here, that's pretty much where Laura's presence in the episode ends, and it's time to move on to the next thing. Okay, so at this point, we have multiple levels of darkness coming into the town, coming over the town to the various characters. And so, how is everybody generally coping with all this darkness coming at them? Well, Josie, I mean, she's she's being framed, and she's really worried about probably losing her life and definitely the mill. So, what is she doing? She's taking pictures at the motel, and she's trying to protect herself. She's probably trying to figure out how to blackmail Ben and Catherine. Yet when Harry calls about it, or when he calls her out about it, it's like she's being all lovey-dovey, like, "Oh, I miss you," and then he asks her like what she was doing over at the motel today, and she says, "Oh, I have to go. Call me tomorrow. Bye." And like gives him zero chance to say anything. Like why is she keeping it secret? um is she actually keeping Harry safe from the situation, like keeping him out of it so his name can stay clear? Is she um keeping him as part of her protection plan? It's probably a little bit of both, because I mean she's lied to Harry already about her place in this whole thing, and tried to blame it all on Ben and Catherine. So, I mean, I think she's playing both sides of this one. And, like what else does this attitude of hers come from? It comes from the fact that she knows Hank, and Hank in this episode really means something. So, yeah, she's kind of getting covered over by it, and trying to protect herself all at the same time, but she's keeping secrets while doing it. And Donna is also a secret keeper. I mean, she teams up with Audrey, but only if it can be kept a secret. James wants to tell the police, but that the necklace had been taken. But Donna needs it to stay a secret. Why? Nobody loved her but us. So I kind of wonder if, like, when she says love, it's like, is that her way of trying to keep this, like, undiluted positive intention? Um, the intention behind the fire, positive or negative. Is she trying to keep the negative out, and only the people who love her are going to be the answer? But her, I mean, what it really seems like, though, I mean, she wants it to be that way, but she's got this negative framework around her. It's like she's kind of traumatized by this whole thing. Nadine and Ben, in the future, they're going to have their own little things where they like try to work out their issues in a public setting, which is like overall healthy for their growth, but it's in this weird negative framework of like, this massive delusion. And I kind of think Donna's doing that right now too, where she should be thinking like James, where, it's like, let's bring people into this. Let's bring the police into this to find answers. And Donna just isn't into that at all. And another part of it is she's telling him, we have to do this for us, not just for her. So it's like, not only is she trying to solve the murder, but she's also trying to get out from under the shadow of Laura. She needs to get something good with James going on. And the only way to do that is to uncouple from the darkness that Laura was draping over her life in a lot of ways. It's not exactly a trigger, but when Donna heard the detail from Audrey that Laura was seeing Jacoby, I almost feel also that Donna was hurt by that. It's like you're not the only super close confidant. The super safe confidant where you could tell the problems to the one person. It's like Donna is not that one person, and she being of the secrets, and Laura having so many secrets. Donna isn't the only one to trust here, and it's kind of a pattern with Donna too, because we'll see her react the same way with Harold. And Harold does the exact same thing that Donna does, where they're both keeping the secrets to themselves. It's like, oh, I have the secret diary, but I'm keeping the memory of Laura pure. There's Donna's an interesting knot. So is Harold. We'll get to that later, but yeah, the keeping of secrets. It's like Donna might think it's doing a good thing, but I think more than anything, it's protecting her and maybe giving her a way to heal from all the stuff that's been happening to her with this relationship too. Okay, so there's another thing that Jacoby was talking about where Laura medicating was a good sign, and he brings up the way monks in Tibet use ginger. Yeah, I mean Cooper called out Jacoby that cocaine and ginger are not the same thing at all, but the instinct is there, and you can kind of see that happening sometimes in here too. Um, it's like Norma and Shelley, they're talking about their men and, the problems that they're bringing into their lives. And, what do they do to problem solve? Well, it's a short term thing, planning a day of beauty, manicure, facial, the works. It's like it gives them a good positive base to heal in, but it doesn't actually fix the problems. Josie, she steps away from her problems with Harry by agreeing to go fishing with Pete. She's really enjoying that friendship, and that friendship is really solid. One thing that I want to point out about that one is that Engels and about Robert Engels in the Artisan DVD commentary, he says the Pete Josie connection was supposed to be stronger, but time, shorter scripts, etc., made the relationship get lost by the end of the mill fire. I was paraphrasing, but yeah, I mean, the point is that it was more unlucky than planned that the Josie Pete relationship would disappear by the end of the season. And that was one of the neater things. And that would have actually helped flesh out Josie in multiple directions instead of just being a mysterious lady embroiled in all this nonsense. But I'd say in general, more than medicating, the thing that most of the people navigating the darker frequencies of Twin Peaks are doing relates to drugs. So the person closest to Laura messed up in this is Bobby, and he comes clean to Shelley about how Leo's connected to the drugs and selling to Laura even. Like, he brings up Laura's name to her. And, of course, he doesn't implicate himself at all. He keeps himself out of it, just kind of like the same exact way that Josie protects herself from Harry by taking herself out of the implications. Yeah, so Bobby and Shelley are kind of getting somewhere with it. They want, Shelley gives him the bloody shirt and everything. And it seems like, one thing they could do right then is go directly to the police, just like Donna. But they kind of want to, they kind of want to solve their Leo problem in a roundabout way too. Kind of like the Day of Beauty doesn't really solve Hank or Leo problems for them, for Shelley and Norma. These problems, like they're kind of redirecting their worries. Shelley, she brings out her gun, and it's like she kind of outsourced the thing to, like, it's like, now that I have the gun can solve the problem. And Bobby's like, now that I have the shirt, this could be the answer to our prayers. It's a thing like where, like, it's in the wishful thinking category. And instead of going straight to the police to solve the problem, he wants to try to do this elaborate framing job against Leo. So, like, they're both actually trying to solve the Leo problem, but they're doing it indirectly. It's like they want to, it's almost like how the Horns bring in Jacoby instead of trying to solve the problem themselves with Johnny Horn. It's just, yeah, it's a thing like that. And then Bobby's tone of voice, it's like, you never saw this, and Bobby will take care of this. And, like, anybody who uses their name in the third person, it kind of makes me wonder almost if Bobby referring to himself in the third person is kind of almost like giving himself a nickname, like, Laura referring to herself as the homecoming queen or something like that. And that, usually kind of that provides a tag for me that, somebody's a little bit in the negative frequency. So they don't seem like they're gonna, like, get too far with actually solving their problems. Okay, and then this is where we can go into the question, what does Hank Jennings' arrival signify? I mean, he's been coming up in this episode already, like the way that I've had to talk around him. And he's got himself connected to both Ben Horn and Leo in different capacities, but yeah, he's connected in the drug scene with which Hank is already connected to Ben and Leo. Those guys are obviously messed up into things. We'll find out later he's connected to Josie as well. So he's playing both sides of pretty much every secret conflict between the the darker characters in this show. And yet here he's paralleled with both Audrey Horn and Bob. So between him and Audrey, they both make a huge case to their family members. Audrey, she gets a job at One Eye Jack's because she says, "Oh, Daddy, I want to be part of the business. I want to change." And in Hank's parole, in the parole hearing, he literally says, "I'll change. I swear on my life, I have changed." So he uses the same exact persuasive technique. And the way he says it in the parole hearing, it reminds me of the way Anthony Sinclair used change, where he's been revealed by quote unquote Dougie and Bushnell Mullins, and he says that he has to either die or change. And yeah, so changing is, it becomes an alchemical sort of thing, which I will go into as we go on. But yeah, it's changing has something in mind here. And either Hank was using it as a sob story that triggers Norma to vouch for him, or he was just trying to convince everybody. It's like maybe he even wanted to half believe it in this case so that it would help him get out. like part of him maybe wanted to believe it. But then he gets Pearl, and Norma gets a call at the diner, and they tell him, they tell her he's coming home. And again, that reminds me of the way Leland said home the other day, or the other episode, where Hawk and Cooper are trying to get him out of there, and he's like in a weird state, yet going specifically home. And Hank is also in a state going home. um, I think it's another way to hammer home that houses aren't actually the secure refuge that small town America would have you believe in Twin Peaks. Um, and now it's happening again to Norma. Okay, now I've been talking around Audrey this episode too. She starts off talking. I've been doing some research. In real life, there is no algebra. So like it's this really fun turn of phrase that really catches the ear, but it also basically says that one of the themes that things are investigated in Twin Peaks that aren't even real. I thought that was an interesting detail to throw in. And yeah, so she finishes talking to Donna, and then the next time we see her, Ben's at his exercise bike back to the camera. And among other things, she says, "Daddy, are you ashamed of me?" And the best Ben can muster is, "Audrey, you're my daughter." And then, he gets around to it that, it's not that he's ashamed of her. He just wishes he could depend on her more. And in this scene, this is going to be the only time in the whole show that you can juxtapose Norma Jennings against Ben Horn. And you have to do it with how they feel about their loved ones. Now, as far as comparing Audrey to Hank in this part, I would say that Audrey, while it is furthering her investigation with, like getting a little bit closer to the department store and learning more about Laura, I think based on the expression on her face when she's hugging Ben and he can't see her face, I kind of feel like she actually does want to believe what she's telling him. It's like she's using him to get further, but I think she also does want to have a better relationship with her dad. So the using change as a way to get further in their investigation, or I mean, to get further in their goals. I don't think that Audrey and Hank are connected by intention, but I do think that Audrey's playing in the same kind of darkness frequency as Hank, and I mean, it gets her captured by One-Eyed Jacks. It gets her, um, I mean, like being this close to the darkness without like intentionally wanting to be there. It'll end up making um, things happen in her future, and I mean, it kind of leads the way for the fact that she's Richard Horn's mom too. She's kind of she's riding the line with darkness so much that eventually it does end up hurting her. So that's about where the connection between Audrey and Hank end. And then there's this other strange juxtaposition with Hank and Bob. So after he reveals himself to Josie and he calls her, he says, "Catch you later," just like he says to Norma after he successfully does his thing in the hearing and he's on the way out the door waiting for their answer. And the way he says it so suspiciously, "Catch you later," it almost reminds me of, like Willie Catcher with a death bag. I mean, obviously I know he's not Bob here. But I think relating the words and the phrasing together isn't probably too far off, especially considering the fact that he sends Josie a drawing. And the other drawing that we get at the beginning of the episode is the Bob sketch. Those are the only two drawings in the whole show at this point. Bob's the sketch of Bob is a big reveal of the metaphysical trouble. And then the domino at the end is a reveal of physical trouble for Josie. So it's they're both kind of like calling cards of darkness in their various levels. The drawings, they signify the further involvement of darkness. It's getting closer, and it's right here. It's basically saying hello through this illustration. And it makes me think of this article by David Titterington on 25 Years Later site. It'll be up there on TV Obsessive too. It's well, I mean, the article's name is Drawing in Twin Peaks, and Titterington basically works his way through ideas from this book called A World Through Lines by an English philosopher and artist called by the name of John Berger. He puts all this through a Twin Peaks lens eventually. I'm gonna read some stuff about the different kinds of drawings. This is from the article. Drawings communicate by using different temporal dimensions or tenses. Present tense drawings record what we see in front of us: a nude model, a landscape, a Leland, anything in our waking world. Conditional tense drawings, on the other hand, record ideas and dreams about what could be, should be, and would be. The third type, past tense drawings, are sketches from memory, which is a different kind of dreaming and a different kind of present moment experience. Through this third type of drawing, artists can, according to Berger, exercise a memory like it's a demon, in order to take an image out of the mind once and for all and put it on paper. Berger says the imagery can be anything: a bug, a bomb, a bob, sweet, sad, frightening, attractive, or cruel, but each has its own way of being unbearable. So Titterington, right in the article, puts Bob in this past tense sort of situation as far as illustrations go. And it feels like Sarah is achieving a certain kind of exorcism here. And, she's able to kind of express herself again. She's able to call the truth of her memory out and give it to the police, which, everybody else is saying, it's like, no, let's keep it secret. And so I would say that's actually a positive sign for Sarah here too, even though it doesn't quite work out in the end. It's a good step in the right direction. As far as Hank's domino, I think that falls more under a present tense sort of a range. It evokes a memory to Josie, but that illustration is more about showing that this is right in front of you now, and it's all about intimidation. So since that previous episode when Harry brought up the presence in the woods, it was said aloud then. And ever since, we've seen the darkness surfacing. And fortifying in this episode. It begins right away with the Bob sketch, and the metaphysical is becoming a physical presence, and then we're also getting the worldly level bad guy physically appearing in the form of Hank. And, technically he didn't walk into town, but, we get him on the phone, and, it's like he's entrenching himself in these other zones. Ben brings him up, and now he's connected to Josie. It's like the darkness is getting bigger and stronger and more part of the narrative. So in Twin Peaks, it basically doesn't matter which frequency you're on, whether you're like even in a positive frequency. The darkness is there, and you're going to bump into it in this narrative eventually, because it's always there and there's always a darkness to fight. And it reminds me of what Margaret said in the Log Lady intro. The battle is drawing nigh in every single aspect of the story. And we will be digging into that as we go. So I think all that's left to be said is, You have been listening to Blue Rose Task Force Podcast, a production of Ruminations Radio Network and TV Obsessive Radio. If you resonate with what you're hearing, please subscribe, rate, and review our show. And we would love to connect with you on Twitter at Blue Rose TF Pod and Instagram and Facebook at Blue Rose Task Force. If you want to be part of our monthly mailbag Patreon episode, send your questions, comments, and feedback to Blue Rose Task Force Podcast at gmail.com. You can find me at JPB_Littlegreen on Twitter and John_the_Peaky on Instagram. Visit Ruminations Radio Network for additional great shows such as 25 Yards Later and Ruminations of Red Room. Find any number of classic 25YL Twin Peaks articles and content on many other TV shows at TVObsessive.com. I'll see you next week as we cover Episode 5, the 6th overall episode of Twin Peaks. Until then, listeners, I'll see you in my dreams.
I wish you the best of luck.
It's a way to kind of deepen and expand the universe that the show takes place in. They'll really dig it. This is a gift to all the fans